Sony FX3 versus Sony FX30 is the topic of the day today, so let's get right into it. Basically, both cameras are a brilliant performance in video making world, and you may divide into groups. Those guys that already know a lot about those cameras and you just may be wondering which choice is better, like for me, because there's always this money factor there that like FX30 is much cheaper than FX3. Or you may be newbies to this kind of cameras and filmmaking world, and you want to know what are the main differences between those cameras. And I'll have some answers to both of those groups today, because we're going to talk about physical differences and production value differences, so performance differences between those two cameras. We'll focus on the main things, the most important things, and I compile all the informations in this particular episode. And then at the end, I'll have my personal recommendation, which camera is for who. Okay, so let's start. First, physical, build quality or generally physical aspects of those cameras. They are basically the same cameras. The only difference is the color of the thread, and there's a sensor in front of FX30 that is a little different than on FX3. So those are the main differences. The physical difference that is worth mentioning is the weight. FX3 is obviously a little heavier, and FX30 is a little lighter than its you know what I mean, FX30 is lighter than FX3. That's what I meant. So it's a small difference. However, if you pair FX30 with full frame lenses and you pair FX30 with crop lenses, you will get a much lighter setup with FX30. So if you like small and lightweight setup, FX30 might be the better choice for you. Physically, the main difference to me is the display. The display is much better, and this is surprising, but not that much surprising if you take a closer look at it. So the display is better at FX30. Why is that? Most probably it's because of the processing power of the processor that is in both cameras. So in case of FX3, the processing unit has to process both the full frame camera and the output. So probably they had to reduce the resolution of the display to make this camera work perfectly with the processing unit that there's inside. So basically FX30 with smaller sensor requires less processing power, so they gave us better and brighter sensor. So that's my guess why the difference is here. But in general, if you look at those displays, FX30 does have a much better display. It is brighter, it does have more resolution. So if there's a lot of work that you do in bright light, FX30 actually can be a better choice for you. However, that brings me to a very important category here, which is video quality of those cameras. However, you have to also remember that FX3, it does have one stop more of dynamic range than FX30, which is kind of obvious because those cameras have different size of sensors, and usually you expect APS-C sensor to have less of a dynamic range than FX3 full frame sensor. However, that difference is really small, and both cameras, when used with S-Log and S-Cinetone profile, that perform fantastically. I mean, the image is really great, and the dynamic range is great, so it gives you a lot of space to correct things in post-production. So I wouldn't be afraid of that small difference, but it's something worth mentioning when we're talking specifically about working in very bright conditions. Like I live in southern Portugal, so I have a lot of sun every day, and we work a lot in bright sun, so that's something to consider. However, nothing to panic. Okay, another difference that I think is worth mentioning here is 4K 120 frames per second. So 4K 120 frames per second is uncropped on FX3, So you just get what you get, and this is really cool. However, in case of FX30, you not only have this 1.5 crop factor, but you also have a extra crop when filming in 4K 120 frames per second. So you have to count something like two times, you know, crop factor when filming in 4K 120 frames per second. So my recommendation would be to film if you are planning to use FX30, to film 4K 60 frames per second. No crop, very good quality, and still you get slow motion. In case of 120 frames per second, also if you combine it with low light conditions, then you will get a lot of noise, and that's not what you want. So those would be my recommendations: FX30 4K 60 frames, FX3 4K 120 frames. That's the best solution you have, so that can give you a hint which camera is better for you. Now, another difference is low light performance, since we mentioned it already. Of course, obviously, like full frame sensor collects more light, so it will give you better performance when it comes to low light. It doesn't mean that low light performance of FX30 is bad. Specifically, if you use bright lenses, you can get still an awesome image quality there. There's a difference between ISO, like high ISO range there, but I don't really care about it, and I don't know anybody that would go anywhere up, you know, above 12,000. That's just really not happening too much, so I just skip it here because it's not important to me. When it comes to image stabilization, both cameras have same image stabilization, more or less. It's like Sony image stabilization. It's not great, so you have to be careful. It's not like Panasonic's image stabilization that is much better. If you want, like, you know, like to use it handheld, which is like, I think for most people, the the main use case here, you have to be careful. You just have to, you know, do this like careful steps, and you don't want to shake this camera too much, because like Sony has to improve something there. Another thing is autofocus performance. It's also the same, because it's the same system, so pretty much it depends on the you know, lenses you will use, as well as color science. The color science is the same. The lenses will give you some difference, but that's pretty much obvious. Battery life almost the same, so there's not much difference. So, you know, those factors will not affect your decision. However, one of the main differences here is the price. FX30 is much more, you know, affordable. It's half of the price, more or less half of the price of FX3. So here comes the recommendations, which camera is for who. If you're new to filmmaking, FX30 can be a great choice. You can also have an access to APS-C lenses that will give you like light and small setup, and those lenses are cheap. There are, for example, awesome Sigma lenses to use with this camera, and you can like really have an awesome setup to start your filmmaking you know, adventure. And when you start making serious money, you will in any case want to invest in more bodies, because you will want to work with more angles, etc, etc. So if you're starting out, FX30 is an amazing choice. And believe me, like some years ago, it was not possible to have such a powerful thing to start with. So like, it's a no-brainer. But if you know that you will need a shallow depth of field, because that's the difference between APS-C and full frame in general, and you want this low light performance, and you want to all use like full frame lenses, or you already own full frame lenses from Sony, then like FX3 is no-brainer. FX3 will be a great choice. And if you already have some, you know, business running like around video production, and you already have clients, you already started making some money, FX3 is a good investment. No doubt. You can like plug it into any setup. You can create beautiful rigs with these cameras, with both of those cameras. So both of those cameras give you an amazing you know, production value and amazing quality for your clients. I hope this video, guys, helped you to make a decision which one is better, or which one is for you in particular, because both cameras are fantastic. I hope to see you guys in the next recording. Please leave thumbs up, ask questions below, comment below, and I see you in the next one. Cheers.